Doug, she got the foghorn.
All right. I like that. Oh, do you want to get the doorbell?
Uh, yeah, so somebody turn it off.
All right, and I will start, Jamie.
Yes, please.
Okay. Good evening. Please be aware that the first hour and a half of this meeting will be recorded so that we can put it onto our website, our podcast, and our YouTube channel. We record in audio only. Feel free to use the podcast on our website along with your big book as a resource if you miss the study portion of the meeting. The study portion is also listed on the website so you can follow along.
You're still going to the
Oh, okay. So
all the way to announcements.
Okay. Tonight's recap will start on page 108 and end on page 110. Our study tonight will start on page 110 and end on page 113. And it is in the chat for those of us that want to follow along. And any announcements?
Good evening, family. My name is Jamie, very grateful recovered alcoholic. And first off, welcome to all who are joining us for the first time. Grateful to have you here, and I hope that we can offer you something that you like and enjoy and will help you along your journey. Should you, anyone decide that they want to become a home group member of this group, you are more than welcome to. All you got to do is let me or Trish know. Just a quick announcement. Last week, I went to fourth quarter Area 64 Assembly. It was wonderful. It was entertaining. We had a blast. And we certainly enjoyed great controversies, as we always do in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I will be putting together a GSR report for you here in the next couple of weeks, and Trish will be emailing it out to everybody, so everybody who's a home group member, please keep your eyes on the email. Our next group conscience is supposed to be in January before first quarter assembly, but we may have to call one sooner. Not 100% sure about that, but we will know that within the next week or so. So keep your eyes open for that as well. And now, on with the big show. Good evening, family. Again, my name is Jamie, and I'm a very grateful recovered alcoholic. Welcome to the Lewisburg Primary Purpose Big Book Study Group. To prepare for our Big Book study, let's get focused by having a 3-minute moment of meditation followed by our family's fog light prayer.
And I'm a recovered alcoholic. My name is Shayna. Thanks for joining us tonight. We're going to start the meditation in a minute, so please take a moment to get situated.
Please be aware of background noises when you are unmuted, and sharing is not to distract others, and especially to not distract yourself. We suggest we all observe proper Zoom etiquette. If you wouldn't do it in a live meeting, please don't do it here. And just a friendly reminder that absence of profanity offends no one. Please keep yourself muted during someone else's share, and we will call on you in the order that hands are raised.
From the forward to the first edition of Alcoholics Anonymous, we of Alcoholics Anonymous are many thousands of men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book and of this group.
For the meditation, some suggestions are: focus on your breath and posture, breathe in God, and breathe out self.
Take this time to reconnect with God. Let the craziness of the day drift away and ask God to help you focus on the study.
And let's bring in those cute little monks and let them do what the monks do so well. Enjoy your time with God, folks. Via if you would like, please join us in our family's foglight prayer. It came to a screen in front of you. Foglight prayer. God, let your love shine through us like a foglight, so that those that are lost, sick, and dying can find your love through us. Amen.
And let's have our secretary's report. Ooh, come on in. Oh,
Lisa.
Lisa, I'm so sorry. Thank you.
No worries. Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa, and I'm your recovered alcoholic secretary for tonight. I've asked Gary to read the recovered statement. We read this notice to explain why many people in this group identify as recovered rather than recovering, and what it exactly means to be a recovered alcoholic. Take it away, Gary.
You're muted, Gary. You gotta unmute, brother. Here, let's try this.
Here I am.
Yeah, there you are.
All right, recovered. We are not cured of alcoholism. Recovered, but not cured, that presents a conflict to some alcoholics. If we were cured, we would be able to drink responsibly. No, we are not cured. The allergic reaction to alcohol will remain with us for a lifetime. But we have been restored to sanity. That was the problem. The main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body. Page 23. We are now sane where alcohol is concerned. Consequently, we have recovered.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you for joining us tonight. We meet every Tuesday starting at 5:30 p.m. Central Time with the Gerbil Fellowship Cage, where we chatter for an hour before the start of the meeting. Feel free to bring side dishes to share with the buzzards. Our Big Book study starts promptly at 6:30 p.m. Central Time, and we ask that you be courteous and ready to begin at the sound of the foghorn. We take our Big Book study seriously. Because of this, chat will be disabled during the study. In the 1940s, when the only elements to sobriety were God, a Big Book, and one recovered alcoholic working with an untreated alcoholic, the success rate was as follows. From the foreword to the second edition of Alcoholics Anonymous, page XX, of alcoholics who came to AA and really tried, 50% got sober at once and remained that way. 25% sobered up after some relapsed, and the remainder, those who stayed on with AA, showed improvement. Can we have a show of hands of people joining us for the first time? Welcome, Gary.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Glad to have you.
And the recovered alcoholics? These are your potential sponsors. Is anyone celebrating a milestone this week?
I'll be 6 months on the 29th.
Wonderful.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And if you should require a big book of your own, we have large print editions available that can be sent to you by buzzard mail. Delivery time questionable. Please remember to practice our 7th tradition by donating to the group address, Venmo, or PayPal posted in the chat and on the screen. Our suggestion is to purchase a big book and take an untreated alcoholic through the program of recovery. Please visit our website posted in the chat. Thank you and see you next week.
Thank you, Lisa. Give me just a second to get back to my script here. From chapter 2, there is a solution. The tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution. We have a way out on which we can absolutely agree and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism.
This is an open meeting, and as such, all who have an interest in alcoholism and our program of recovery are welcome. Because this is an open meeting, you need not identify yourself, nor your reason for being here if you do not wish to do so. Your anonymity will be protected. We ask that you protect ours.
I'm guessing we lost some of your audio volume because you got babies sleeping. Okay, very good. While this is an open meeting, membership in this group is limited to those who wish to recover from alcoholism and have a desire to stop drinking for good and all. Each member of Alcoholics Anonymous is a potential sponsor of a new member and should clearly recognize the obligations and duties of such a responsibility.
And may we have, before we begin our study of the Big Book, last week we reviewed tradition. I'm actually not 100% sure. 5. Perfect. And then tonight, let's take a quick look at tradition 6. Please refer to page 562 of Alcoholics Anonymous. And who is our traditionalist?
Sassy Pickle is.
Oh, yay, Sassy.
Come on in,
in,
Heather.
girl.
Hello, thank you so much. Hi, I'm Heather. I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic. Tonight, Tradition 6, short form of Tradition 6, an AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. Long form. Problems of money, property, and authority may easily divert us from our primary spiritual aim. Any considerable property of genuine use to AA should be separately incorporated and managed. AA groups should never go into business. The purpose of Tradition 6 is to maintain the integrity of the AA program, keep the group's focus, and maintain its primary spiritual goal. In Language of the Heart, Bill wrote, "The 6th of the 12 points of the transition is so important that it states at length the relation of the AA movement to money and property. This tradition declares in substance that the accumulation of money, property, and unwanted personal authority so often generated by material wealth compromise a cluster of serious hazards against which an AA group must ever be on guard." So what does this mean? It means that the main idea is to prevent distractions from the core purpose of AA by not getting involved with activities that might prioritize financial or social status over helping those struggling with alcoholism. An AA group shouldn't engage in business activities or heavily rely on outside funding that could create conflicts of interest. By not associating with the outside entities, AA groups can maintain their autonomy and focus on the primary mission. It goes on to state, however, wealthy as individuals, AA itself must remain poor. We dare not risk any distraction of corporate wealth. Money and quantity has always been a baleful influence on group life. In my experience, when we stick to the primary spiritual purpose, we not only reach our primary goals, but we reach all of our individual and group goals. I'm grateful that at Lewisburg Primary Purpose Big Book Study Group, we don't let money, prestige, or any outside issues divert us from being useful to other alcoholics in and out of these rooms, or strengthening bonds and fellowship. We're not here to be liked or to increase our social status or to get rich on AA's name. Personally, I'm here so that I can continue to give away what was so freely given to me and to continue to grow and align with God as I walk alongside all of you in this journey. God continues to work in my life daily and to make even more miracles when I focus on my purpose and allow Him to do the rest. Here's to keeping it simple. Tradition 6 tells me the purpose of this tradition is to maintain the integrity of the AA program, to keep the group's focus and maintain its primary spiritual goal. Without this worthy and necessary goal, we and other alcoholics may surely die. Integrity means the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles, moral uprightness. An example is being known to be a person of integrity. Integrity looks a lot like honesty, honor, good character, ethics, morals, virtue, decency, sincerity and truthfulness, trustworthiness. The opposite is dishonesty. We do the right thing even when no one is watching. That is what this program teaches us. I always want to lead my life with integrity in all that I do, in and out of these rooms. Thank you for letting me be your traditionalist.
Thank you so much, Heather. You have done a fabulous job over the last 3 weeks. And folks, join us next week and we will have a new traditionalist for traditions 7, 8, and 9. And now it's time for our weekly segment of That Ain't in the Book. We hear a lot of stuff said in meetings that can't be reconciled with the program as described in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. One of the things we often hear is, stay out of relationships for the first year. And Larry's going to come in and tell us what it has to say about that on page 70 in the second paragraph. Come on in, Larry. You're muted. Larry, you are muted.
Hey, I'm Larry. It says, we earnestly pray for the right ideal for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity, and for the strength to do the right thing.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for being of service tonight.
And as we study, please make use of pens, highlighters, and rulers so that you can share this experience with another alcoholic.
As we study, wrong line. In order for us to stay focused as we study the Big Book, we use the Big Book Study Guide prepared by Joe and Charlie and Krusty Cliff of the Dallas Primary Purpose Group.
And tonight we are going to start our recap on page 108, which will be read by Susan, followed by our study portion.
Read by Terry.
I would say read by Terry, sorry. After the page is read, we will ask questions from the imaginary podium, starting back on our study portion that was read by Terry. The answers will be one sentence unless otherwise specified, and multi-part questions are simply a one-sentence answer, split up by commas, semicolons, hyphens, and other fun bits of punctuation.
Basically, in English, what that means is we are going to read the material once through and then dissect the information a second time through the question and answer format. Notice how the language in the question gives us a new light in which to consider the study material.
This is important because hearing the question and rereading the content offers a definite way of comprehending the material covered. After we've completed the study, we open up for comment, questions, and observations based on what was just read. If you have spiritual experiences with this information, you are free to share. Please keep your share on topic and under 5 minutes. At the 5-minute mark, you may hear a timer beep to let you know that your time is finished.
However, Big Book study is not therapy. Should you begin sharing on topics which are more appropriately discussed in a different setting, for example with a sponsor, please do not be offended when we cut that conversation short and send the buzzards nipping at your heels. For that purpose, we have fellowship meetings before and after our study time.
You can never go wrong by commenting on the pages studied, which brings us to the words of one of the co-founders of Alcoholics Anonymous: sobriety, freedom from alcohol, through the teaching and practice of the 12 steps. is the sole purpose of any Alcoholics Anonymous group.
And how we arrived at this point, folks, we are in our 66th week of this round of studies, and we didn't just wake up today and say, well, we're going to study page 108 tonight. This book study started in my house 5 years ago with 12 other alcoholics, and then on January 7th. And then we had that little thing known as COVID hit that brought us all together as we are now. And we went 100% virtual. We are coming into our 5th year as a group doing this study, and we are in our 3rd season because this is a 94-week book study from beginning to end. And we start with the title page, and as we go through the preface, the forewords, we have the question and answer format, the same one that we use. We do it with the doctor's opinion, which tells us about our disease, Bill's story, which is a classic 12-step call, moving into there's a solution to show us that there's some hope for us. Then we move into more about alcoholism, which is really only about 2 things, untreated alcoholism and the mental obsession. And then we move into one of the greatest chapters of all, we agnostics, which becomes a pathway for us to let go of old ideas and old beliefs and open our heart and mind to new ideas and new beliefs. And we move into chapter 5, how it works, which really tells us only how to do 2 things, how to take steps 3 and 4. And it gives us the prayers that we use, the actions that we take, and the promises that result from using the prayers and taking the actions. From there, we move into chapter 6, which is just 16 short pages, and in that 16 short pages, it takes us through 7 steps, from step 5 to step 11. And then we start moving into the chapter working with others, and which that was the last chapter. From there, is where we begin to practice our program in our homes, and the 3 lost chapters, to wives, to the family afterward, and to the employers. And this week we're just in that chapter that everybody loves to hate, the chapter to wives. So and we do this all the way through the process of the book. When we're done, we do about 8 weeks on Dr. Bob's story with the same format, and 2 weeks on the traditions through the question and format, and also we revisit the spiritual experience for a 4th time throughout the book study with a standalone meeting on the spiritual experience. And then the buzzards circle around, and we do it all over again, starting with the next season. So we are glad and grateful to have you. If you have a big book, please follow along. If you need a big book and you're new, send a message to Trish, and she'll get your address, and the group will be happy to give you a big book free of cost. So that's what we got, and you got one more thing to read before we start, Shana.
And before we start the recap, we will need 5 or 6 virtual hands raised if you'd like to be one of our answer readers. Please be aware that the first hour and a half of this meeting will be recorded so that we can put it onto our website and our YouTube channel.
Well, we got one hand up so far, and I think Susan's going to go ahead and read, right? So go ahead and start. Go ahead and start reading. At the rate we're going, you might be answering all the questions tonight too, Susan.
Hi, good evening, higher power, and good evening, family. My name is Susan. I'm an alcoholic. These are some of the questions which race through the mind of every woman who has an alcoholic husband. We hope this book has answered some of them. Perhaps your husband has been living in that strange world of alcoholism where everything is distorted and exaggerated. You can see that he really does love you with his better self. Of course, there is such such a thing as incompatibility, but in nearly every instance, the alcoholic only seems to be unloving and inconsiderate. It is usually because he is warped and sickened that he says and does these appalling things. Today, most of our men are better husbands and fathers than ever before. Try not to condemn your alcoholic husband, no matter what he says or does. He is just another very sick, unreasonable person. Treat him when you can as though he had pneumonia. When he angers you, remember that he is very ill. There is an important exception to the foregoing. We realize some men are thoroughly bad-intentioned, that no amount of patience will make any difference. An alcoholic of this temperament may be quick to use this chapter as a club over your head. Don't let him get away with it. If you are positive he is one of this type, you may feel you had better leave. Is it right to let him ruin your life and the lives of your children? Especially when he has before him a way to stop his drinking and abuse if he really wants to pay the price. The problem with which you struggle usually falls within one of four categories. One, your husband may be only a heavy drinker. His drinking may be constant, or it may be heavy only on certain occasions. Perhaps he spends too much money for liquor. It may be showing him up mentally and physically, but he does not see it. Sometimes he is a source of embarrassment to you and his friends. He is positive he can handle his liquor, that it does him no harm, that drinking is necessary in his business. He would probably be insulted if he were called an alcoholic. This world is full of people like him. Some will moderate or stop altogether, and some will not. Of those who keep on, a good number will become true alcoholics after a while. 2, your husband is showing a lack of control, for he is unable to stay on the water wagon even when he wants to. He often gets entirely out of hand when drinking. He admits this is true, but is positive that he will do better. He has begun to try, with or without your cooperation, various means of moderating or staying dry. Maybe he is beginning to lose his friends. His business may suffer somewhat. He is worried at times and is becoming aware that he cannot drink like other people. He sometimes drinks in the morning and through the day also to hold his nervousness in check. He is remorseful after serious drinking bouts and tells you he wants to stop. But when he gets over the spree, he begins to think once more how he can drink moderately next time. We think this person is in danger. These are the earmarks of a real alcoholic. Perhaps he can still tend to business fairly well. He has by no means ruined everything. As we say among ourselves, he wants to stop. 3, this husband has gone much further than husband number 2. Though once like number 2, he became worse. His friends have slipped away, his home is a near wreck, and he cannot hold a position. Maybe the doctor has been called in, and the weary round of sanitariums and hospitals has begun. He admits he cannot drink like other people, but does not see why. He clings to the notion that he will yet find a way to do so. He may have come to the point where he desperately wants to stop, but cannot. His case presents additional questions, which we shall try to answer for you. You can be quite hopeful of a situation like this. 4, you may have a husband of whom you completely despair. He has been placed in one institution after another. He is violent or appears definitely insane when drunk. Sometimes he drinks on the way home from the hospital. Perhaps he has had delirium tremens. Doctors may shake their heads and advise you to have him committed. Maybe you have already been obliged to put him away. This picture may not be as dark as it looks. Many of our husbands were just as far gone, yet they got well.
You're muted, Shana.
I'm sorry. I said thank you, Susan. And it looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4
Four.
leaders.
Oral work.
Oral work? Okay. And now, Terry, for the study portion, please. Starting
Okay.
on page 110.
Let's now go back to husband number 1. Oddly enough, he is often difficult to deal with. He enjoys drinking. It stirs his imagination. His friends feel closer over a highball. Perhaps you enjoy drinking with him yourself when he doesn't go too far. You have passed happy evenings together chatting and drinking before your fire. Perhaps you both like parties, which would be dull without liquor. We have enjoyed such evenings ourselves. We had a good time. We know all about liquor as a social lubricant. Some, but not all of us, think it has its advantage when reasonably used. The first principle of success is that you should never be angry. Even though your husband becomes unbearable and you have to leave him temporarily, you should. If you can, go without rancor. Patience and good temper are most necessary. Our next thought is that you should never tell him what he must do about his drinking. If he gets the idea that you are a nag or a killjoy, your choice of accomplishing anything useful may be zero. He will use that as an excuse to drink more. He will tell you he is misunderstood. This may lead to lonely evenings for you. He may seek someone else to console him, not always another man. Be determined that your husband's drinking is not going to spoil your relations with your children or your friends. We need your companionship. They need your companionship and your help. It is possible to have a full and useful life though your husband continues to drink. We know women who are unafraid, even happy under these conditions. Do not set your heart on reforming your husband. You may be unable to do so, no matter how hard you try. We know these suggestions are sometimes difficult to follow, but you will save many a heartbreak if you can succeed in observing them. Your husband may come to appreciate your reasonableness and patience. This may lay the groundwork for a friendly talk about his alcohol problem. Try to have him bring up the subject himself. Be sure you're not critical during such a discussion. Attempt instead to put yourself in his place. Let him see that you want to be helpful rather than critical. When a discussion does arise, you might suggest he read this book or at least the chapter on alcoholism. Tell him you have been worried, though perhaps needlessly. You think he ought to know the subject better, as everyone should have a clear understanding of the risk he takes if he drinks too much. Show him you have confidence in his power to stop or moderate. Say you do not want to be a wet blanket, that you only want to take care of his health. Thus, you may succeed in interesting him in alcoholism. He probably has several alcoholics among his own acquaintances. You might suggest that you both take an interest in them. Drinkers like to help other drinkers. Your husband may be willing to talk to one of them. If this kind of approach does not catch your husband's interest, it may be best to drop the subject. But after a friendly talk with your husband will usually revive the topic himself. This may take patient waiting, but it will be worth it. Meanwhile, you might try to help the wife of another serious drinker. If you act upon these principles, your husband may stop or moderate. Suppose, however, that your husband fits a description of number 2. The same principles which apply to husband number 1 should be practiced. But after his next binge, ask him if he would really like to get over drinking for good. Do not ask that he do it for you or anyone else. Just would he like to? The chances are he would. Show him your copy of this book and tell him what you have found out about alcoholism. Show him that as alcoholics, the writers of the book understand. Tell him some of the interesting stories you've read. If you think he will be shy of a spiritual remedy, ask him to look at the chapter on alcoholism. Then perhaps he will be interested enough to continue. If he is enthusiastic, to your cooperation will mean a great deal. If he is lukewarm or thinks he is not an alcoholic, we suggest you leave him alone. Avoid urging him to follow our program. The seed has been planted in his mind. He knows that thousands of men, much like himself, have recovered. But don't remind him of this after he has been drinking, for he may be angry. Sooner or later, you are likely to find him reading the book once more. Wait until repeated stumbling convinces him he must act. For the more you hurry him, the longer his recovery may be delayed.
Thank you, Terry. All right.
And I've got to kick it off with a comment, Shayna, and I'll be coming in with some periodic comments throughout this, folks. Our comment starting off, now that it has been determined how far the alcoholic has advanced into the disease, the text lays out specific suggestions on how to best help the drinker. All yours, Shayna.
All right, and just again for our answer readers, please speak clearly into your microphones. We'll ask the questions from our script by Joe and Charlie and Krusty Cliff. The answers to the questions will be sentence by sentence, coming directly out of this week's study, beginning with the first sentence and ending with the last one. If those answering questions lose their place, please allow the question reader to direct them to the correct sentence. Okay, in tonight's batting order, I have Susan, Trish, Kenny, Larry, and William.
And Terry.
And Terry.
Too. Yeah.
Oh, Terry.
So you got your 6, girl.
Yeah, I match, my hand matches the background.
The background. I'm sorry, buddy.
I'll have to change that. I think I can, huh?
I don't know. I've played with it.
I don't know.
Okay, so back to the beginning of tonight's study portion. I am starting with you, Miss Susan, at page 110. And for husband number 1, this will be a 2-sentence answer. Susan, what will be difficult?
Can I ask a question? I just want to, what page?
Yes.
Right.
William, page 110, and we're starting with let's now go back to husband number 1.
I'm putting it back in the chat for anybody who gets lost.
Thank you. Okay, so, yeah. And Susan, for husband number 1, what will be difficult? 2 sentences.
Let's now go back to husband number 1. Oddly enough, he is often difficult to deal with.
Thank you. And Trish, why is this? 3 sentences, please.
He enjoys drinking. It stirs his imagination. His friends feel closer over a highball.
Thank you. And Kenny, perhaps you too enjoy what?
Perhaps you enjoy drinking with him when he doesn't go too far.
Right, thank you. And Larry, why would that be? 2 sentences, please.
You have passed happy evenings together, chatting and drinking before your fire. Perhaps you both like parties, which would be dull without liquor.
Thank you. And William, how do we know this? 2 sentences, please.
We have enjoyed such evening ourselves. We had a good time. We had a good time. We know all about living as a social meeting. Some, but not all of us.
Just that's
Thank
all.
you.
Yep. We know
Okay,
all about
thank you.
liquor as the social lubricant. Thank you, William. And
Thank you.
Terry, what do some, but not all of us believe?
Some, but not all of us, think it has its advantage when reasonably used.
And I have a comment. Please note that some of these suggestions will appear to be difficult, if not impossible. A little farther in this chapter, you will be told what you can do to make these suggestions and recommendations possible.
Thank you, Jamie. And we're going back to Susan. We're at the page 11. What is the first principle?
The first principle of success is that you should never be angry.
Thank you. And Trish, this should apply even if what?
Even though your husband becomes unbearable and you have to leave him temporarily, you should, if you can, go without rancor.
Thank you. And Kenny, what are most necessary?
Patience and good temper are most necessary.
Thank you. And Larry, what is our next thought?
Our next thought is that you should never tell him what he must do about his drinking.
Thank you. And William, if he thinks you're a nag, what will be the consequences?
If he gets the idea that you are a nag or killjoy, your chances of accomplishing anything useful may be zero.
Thank you. And Terry, what 2 things will probably happen if he considers you a nag? 2 sentences, please.
He will use that as an excuse to drink more. He will tell you he is misunderstood.
Thank you, Terry. And Susan, this may well lead to what?
This may lead to lonely evenings for you.
Thank you. And Trish, he may also do what?
He may seek someone else to console him, not always another man.
Thank you. And Kenny, be determined that drinking will not do what?
Be determined that your husband's drinking is not going to spoil your relation with your children or friends.
Thank you. And Larry, what will they need?
They need your companionship and your help.
Thank you. And William, what is possible?
It is possible to have a full and useful life, though your husband may continue to drink.
Thank you. And Terry, is that based on experience or opinions?
We know women who are unafraid, even happy under these conditions.
Yeah. And Susan, what should you not set your heart on?
Do not set your heart on reforming your husband.
Trish, why?
You may be unable to do so, no matter how hard you try.
And Kenny, what do we know?
We know these suggestions are sometimes difficult to follow, but you will save many a heartbreak if you can succeed in observing them.
Yes. And Larry, what may he come to appreciate?
Your husband may come to appreciate your reasonableness and patience.
Thank you. And William, where could this lead?
This may This may lay the groundwork for a friendly talk about his alcohol problem.
Thank you. And Terry, let him do what?
Try to have him bring up the subject himself.
Thank you. And Susan, when he does, you must not be what?
Be sure you are not critical during such a discussion.
Thank you. Trish, try to do what?
Attempt instead to put yourself in his place.
Excellent. And Kenny, be sure to let him see that you want to be what?
Let him see that you want to be helpful rather than critical.
Excellent. And Larry, this is a two-part question. A, when you finally do get into a discussion, what might you do? And B, or at least read what chapter in the big book?
When a discussion does arise, you might suggest he read this book, at least the chapter on alcoholism.
Thank
And
you.
I have another comment. We will notice the common suggestion for all four categories is to see that the problem drinker has access to the book.
Thank you, Jamie. And William, on page 112. What might you tell him?
Tell him you have been worried, though perhaps needlessly.
Thank you. And Terry, tell him you think he should know more about what subject?
You think he ought to know the subject better, as everyone should have a clear understanding of the risk he takes if he drinks too much.
Thank you. And Susan, what should you show him?
Show him you have confidence in his power to stop or moderate.
Thank you. And Trish, what might you say then?
Say you do not want to be a wet blanket, that you only want him to take care of his health.
Thank you. And Kenny, by following this approach, you might succeed in doing what?
Thus, you may succeed in interesting him in alcoholism.
Yes. And Larry, very likely he will have several what?
He will probably have several alcoholics among his own acquaintances.
Thank you. And William, what might you suggest with this possibility?
You might suggest that you both take an interest in them.
Thank you. And Terry, who do drinkers like to help?
Drinkers like to help other drinkers.
Yeah. And Susan, what may he then be willing to do?
Your husband may be willing to talk to one of them.
Yes. And Trish, this is a two-part question. If this doesn't get him talking, what should you do? And B, what will usually happen later?
If this kind of approach does not catch your husband's interest, it may be best to drop the subject. But after a friendly talk, your husband will usually revive the topic himself.
Thank you. And Kenny, another two-part. This will require what on your part, but it will what?
This may take patience, waiting, but it will be worth it.
Yes.
Meanwhile,
Thank you. Nope, that's all. Thank you. And Larry, meanwhile, you might use your time to do what?
Meanwhile, you might try to help the wife of another serious drinker.
Yes. And William, what might happen if you follow these suggestions?
If you act upon these principles, Your husband may stop or moderate.
Thank you. And now we're moving on to husband number 2. And Terry, what principles should be applied at the start? 2 sentences, please.
Suppose, however, that your husband fits the description of number 2. The same principles which apply to husband number 1 should be practiced.
Thank you. And Susan, but after the next binge, you should ask him what?
But after his next binge, ask him if he would really like to get over drinking for good.
Thank you. And Trish, be sure to not do what?
Do not ask that he do it for you or anyone else.
Right. And Kenny, would he do it for himself?
Just would he like to?
Thank you. And Larry, the chances are what?
The chances are he would.
Excellent. And William, this is a 2-part. What should you show him? And what should you tell him?
Show him your copy of this book and tell him what you have found out about alcoholism.
Thank you. And Terry, what should you help him understand?
That as alcoholics, the writers of the book understand.
Right. And Susan, what do you tell him you found interesting?
Tell him some of the interesting stories you have read.
Yeah. And Trish, if he is shy about the solution, ask him to read what chapter?
If you think he will be shy of a spiritual remedy, ask him to look at the chapter on alcoholism.
Yes. And now we're going to page 113. Kenny, what may this do for him?
Then perhaps he will be interested enough to continue.
Yes. And Larry, your cooperation will mean a lot if he is what?
If he is enthusiastic, your cooperation will mean a great deal.
Yes. And William, if he is not really interested, what should you do?
If he is lukewarm or think he is not an alcoholic, we suggest you leave him alone.
Yes. And Terry, what should you not do?
Avoid urging him to follow our program.
Yeah. And Susan, what have you accomplished?
The seed has been planted in his mind.
And Trish, he now knows what very important fact?
He knows that thousands of men, much like himself, have recovered.
Yes. And Kenny, what should you never do?
But don't remind him of this after he has been drinking, for he may be angry.
Yeah. And Larry, sooner or later, you very likely will see him doing what?
Sooner or later, you may likely to find him reading the book once more.
Yes. And William, what should you wait for, and why should you wait? 2-part question.
Wait until he repeats stomach convinces him convince him he must act. The more you hunger him, the longer his recovery may be delayed.
Yes, thank you. All right. And so now we are going to open for sharing. And if you have experience with this portion of the book that was just read, please feel free to share. Please be mindful of your time and that others may have their hands raised and are waiting to share. Friendly reminder as we share, absence of profanity offends no one. All right, we are now open for comments, questions, observations, and spiritual experience based on what was just read. No? No hands?
As I always say, it's a chapter everybody loves to hate.
All right, I'll come in. Shayna, recovered alcoholic. Ooh, I don't know. I don't hate this chapter. I can find myself, clear as day. I wouldn't say clear as day. I probably relate to husband number 2 and or 3. I could identify that, maybe I hadn't wrecked everything or lost it all yet, but I knew there was something. I just thought that I could push through it. And I've shared before, what even got me to agree to rehab was to prove to, my family that I didn't have this disease or this problem. I remember my brother saying, just take a 30-day vacation, but it was there that I truly could find, once I was detoxed, I really could truly find where I had the spiritual malady, the hole in the soul, mental obsession, and I had no idea what to do about it until I came into this program that was suggestive, and I, got out my textbook and started following the directions. Definitely rocky at first, finding a sponsor. I still remember being in a speaker meeting and stumbling up to her, put my tail between my legs and said, hi, do you sponsor people? And thank God for this program, she does. And she still is my sponsor. And I think that's all I got right now. I'm curious what everybody else has. Thank you. See, I don't know if Michael, or I think Michael, you come on in. I think you were first.
Okay, Michael, recovering alcoholic. Hey, I've read this chapter a few times, and I can relate to all three of those husbands in my drinking days. And the thing that struck me tonight, as you guys were reading, that well, let me back up a little bit. When I first read it, and I had the thought, man, I wonder if my ex-wife now could have used this chapter to deal with my intoxication or my disease. But tonight I had the thought, and some of you guys may know the answer to this, Jamie, that how often is this chapter utilized by spouses today? Back when it was written, I'm guessing that it was utilized more often than it is today. But I just don't know. It's just something that occurred to me, as an alcoholic and as a husband. My wife didn't have access to it, and I didn't have a clue about AA, as far as being an option for me at that point. As a matter of fact, I didn't even want to stop drinking. But I just want to know if it's being utilized more. I know they have the Al-Anon thing, but it just crossed my mind. I thought I'd throw that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I don't know if Jamie has those statistics, but now I'm curious too.
I'll come in with my share. Art will probably have some ideas on it as well.
Awesome. Okay. Larry, what you got?
Yeah, I'm Larry, and I'm an alcoholic. I feel like I was husband 1, 2, and 3 in progression. And by the time I was husband number 3, I really did not even recognize I was number 3. I was pretty much in denial that anything was wrong. I had no intention of stopping drinking. It was only, you know, I know that, I was dropped off at the airport by my now ex-wife that had pretty much given up on me, but it was her that got in touch with my mom and informed her that I needed help and gave her a name of a friend of ours that lived in Tennessee, which was a psychologist, and worked with drug and alcohol, people, and he had come to Las Vegas once to visit by the call of my wife. I didn't realize that she was worried about me long before she gave up on me. But anyway, I really, I went to get help because basically I was in need of a place to stay, and my mom said I needed help, and so I did. And so I don't know that I have experience with a loving spouse trying to get me help, and yet it was my spouse that got me help, in a roundabout way. And I died in rehab, being detoxed, or not rehab, but in a setting of trying to get off the drugs and alcohol that I was on. I was being given fluids so that I didn't dehydrate, and I was going through DTs, and my heart actually stopped, and thank goodness that I had this friend, that was there, and he had the means and the medical equipment to actually bring me back to life. That was the first time that I realized I really had a problem. I had no idea that I knew I was addicted. I knew that I liked to drink and I liked to do all those things, and I drank a lot and I drugged a lot. I knew all those things, but to say I had a problem, I didn't see it. It was during detox that I realized I really had a problem and I needed help. I really needed help. And so, but it was a spouse that got me in touch with this guy. It was a spouse and my mother that lovingly gave me the hard choices, because I would have never chosen it on my own. I had no intentions of stopping my lifestyle. So I don't know. I didn't have this loving touch, that came around. But man, when I found it, when I really found this program and what it had to offer, it was then that I found the real love and compassion and power that I needed in my life. That's all I got.
Thank you so much, Larry. All right, William?
Yes, my name is William Alcoholic. Happy holidays to everybody. And definitely every time I read the big book, there's always ceases to amaze me how they put this book together and the PR, the public information, and the what we call it, they did just with this book alone, just in this book alone. And not only, well, I was clueless about myself whenever I was out there, but as I began to read the book and stay here, I began to see the characteristic of behavior that they talk about today in this chapter. They talked about before that, and in the previous chapter, they sort of explained that if he's a sick person, he got alcoholism. I didn't know anything about alcoholism before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. So I learned all that once I got here. So my sponsor didn't tell me I had alcoholism. She told me something like this: "You are very sensitive. You want what you want." And so you're very sensitive. You take everything personal, and you want what you want when you want it. So I sort of understood that. But the rest of it, if you had told me I was sick, uh, something like that, it would have took some time for it to get in there, and it did. It took some time for that to get across to me because I always equated sickness to some physical, something that was wrong with you, and never the mental part of sickness that goes wrong here. And as this part that we read tonight, I could see the alcoholic react to these situations like they was talking about in the book, that the pride, the anger, the fear, all those God-given instinct that God gave us for survival, how they being alcoholic, that I use them the improper way, if I would say the improper way, because if you told me something, I said, I know, you know what I mean? So I wouldn't hear nothing that you said. Other thing, he was talking about not to, what to call it, he isolate himself and be alone, and I know about that. Once you start talking about my behavior, yeah, my pride kicked in and said, you're not going to get any more of my alcohol. So I wind up home alone, drinking alone, but I couldn't find no peace, But like they put this book in every corner where the alcoholic goes. And I like the part we read tonight, just before it closed. It was talking about when your husband may have some acquaintance, some people they drink with, and how they was trying to spread the word to other people. Even though your husband may not want it now, maybe their acquaintance may want it. Because it's like us continue to spread the word about alcoholism. Because this book was written in 1939, and a lot of people didn't understand us the way they do today. You know what I mean? So I'm grateful whenever I came in here, people understood it, even though I didn't understand, because I never heard anything about AA. And I grew up around alcoholism, and my mother and father died when I was 2 years of age, and I lived with my aunt. And my uncle, he would get so drunk that he would lay down on the ground, and I lived it on a farm, and she would take the axe handle and beat him and call him you lazy and every other swearing word that she could use to try to get him to move. I remember when he passed and stuff, and his whole liver came out through his mouth and shit. He regurgitated, all that stuff was wrong, and it still didn't know what it was, still didn't understand it, but today, we have evolved to where we on Zoom, big book, and where they place this book into doctors, police, fire department, therapists, and all these offices so they can pass this information on, because it's still a fight with the disease, So every time I believe, this my opinion, I believe every time one person gets over, there's a chance of another like 5 other people could be helped or get the information about the disease. Now, my youngest son, called me last week and stuff, and he told me that his counsel was sending him to Alcoholics Anonymous. Boy, did I felt so relieved because of that. I felt such a relief. But the question came after that. Now, he asked me, could I be his sponsor? I said, no, because his counsel told me you got to find a sponsor. He asked me if I could be his counsel, and I said, no, I was your sponsor. I said, no, I can't do that. I've been sponsoring you for 40-some years, helping you out along the way when stuff happens. So your ideal of me being your sponsor ain't going to be the type that you would get an alcohol. I didn't tell him that, but I just simply said, no, you have to find somebody. Go to meet you. Somebody will be glad to help you. And I know they will. Because that's what they did to me. So I'm grateful for this program. I'm grateful that they still spread the word. But in the beginning, it was only this big book. And though you may be one man with this book in your hand, you could help somebody. And they really did a good job putting it together so you could do that by reading them stories in the back for identification and all that stuff it is. So it always amazes me whenever I read it and see what's in it that I didn't know was in it before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. So I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Excellent. And Jamie.
Good evening, family. My name is Jamie. Very grateful, recovered alcoholic, and so grateful that all of you are with us tonight. So first I will go to Michael's question. When I got sober, this book was written and published 35 years before I got sober. Or actually, I'm sorry, 35 years before I was born. And you know what? They knew something. They had a winning combination here. So alcoholism doesn't affect anyone differently today than it did then. It still has the same effect. Now, that might be a little more intensified by some of the modern day chemistry that we have and mix with it. But even in this book, it also talks about the combination of mixing sedatives and alcohols. Many of us use those uptime drugs and alcohol and so on. So sometimes it often, I think, has a tendency to advance us to more agitation, more irritation, more anxiety, and certainly a lot more domestic violence. But we're also a much larger population than we were in the 1930s. We've added millions of people since then. So this chapter is a pre-Al-Anon chapter. Now, when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous in 1990, here's the really cool thing. Even though Al-Anon had been around, and on page 121 at the very bottom in the footnote, it gives you information on the Al-Anon family programs. I knew some black belt Al-Anons. My sponsor used to be married to one, and several of the other lady Al-Anons that she hung out with where I got sober. And while they had their own books, they had their own literature, many of them were big book Al-Anons. And they used this chapter, the family afterward, and the chapter to employers in their lives, because all of those things had affected them in their lives, which I think was really quite a powerful thing. So, is it as widely used today? Probably not. In my first marriage, my wife never had exposure to this chapter. Why? Because I never had exposure, even though my mother was sober, I never really had exposure to Alcoholics Anonymous. I certainly wasn't sober. I didn't have a book. I couldn't have gone and said, hey, look at this, babe. Here's what you need. This is going to fix you. Which is something that is not my place to do anyway. It's not my place to fix them. just to offer a significant other a pathway. One of the really important things about this and these particular pages is we are in the process of qualifying in our own homes, in our own families, and it doesn't have to be a female. It could be, you know, you could be a lady and the man could be the or a man and the lady could be the alcoholic. But what we're doing is we're giving the non-alcoholic a pathway to recognizing alcoholism in their own home and what types of alcoholics that there may be. In the doctor's opinion, on page XXX, it gives us a description of 5 types of alcoholics. Here, it gives us a description of 4 types of alcoholics. This is something that I definitely identify with. And in the doctor's opinion, I'm going to paraphrase it, but it says something about this classification of alcoholics, and it goes on to say, these types and many more are outside the scope of this book, meaning we really don't know how many types of alcoholics that there might be in the world. We basically classified it down to 4 or 5 different types. You know, in the doctor's opinion, it talks about the manic depressive type, about whom a whole chapter could be written. Well, today there's a different diagnosis for manic depression, and it's called bipolar. But it's still manic depression. You know, we just had some psychologists that decided, oh, well, we need to give it a new name and we can make more money off of it, and, you know, we can do all these other things. But it's still the same thing. So one of the things that I love about especially tonight's reading is it's talking a little bit about those kind of mood swings that we alcoholics might have. You know, and this becomes a warning signal. And, you know, I absolutely love that it's telling them the truth. For example, he will use this as an excuse to drink more. He will tell you he's misunderstood. And then comes the warning, this may lead to lonely evenings for you. He may ask someone else to console him, not always another man. Well, some of us have lived in marriages where there has been some infidelity, you know, and it's not always because we've been eating on that horny goat weed. It's because we, you know, alcohol oftentimes will lubricate us so that we will do things that we wouldn't do under normal conditions. You know, here, a little farther down the page, be sure you are not critical during such a discussion. Attempt instead to put yourself in his place. Let him see that you want to be helpful rather than critical. You know, I think about in Bill's story where he says that my wife was disturbed by my drinking. Lois is probably all over his ass at that point. But, and I'm sure many of us have been there. I certainly have. Here's what I do know. Each time I read this chapter, and we've had many people who say, oh, it's a misogynist chapter. Oh, it's this. Oh, it's that. Here's the thing, and I know I'm taking a little longer than I'm supposed to. I apologize. Here's something that's important to recognize about this chapter as well. In the 1930s, there were very few women alcoholics coming to Alcoholics Anonymous, and one of the big reasons for this, and it doesn't mean that there weren't many female alcoholics out there. Generally, if you were a man and you had to go dry out, you went to the sanitarium, you dried out, you came back home, you to your wife and to your kids and to your job and got back into society. But the stigma of a woman alcoholic in the 1930s was more of your kids got taken away, your husband divorced you, you ended up in an institution, sanitarium, whatever, many times for many, many years with no hope of ever getting out or seeing your family or having things back the way they were. Unfortunately, society, not Alcoholics Anonymous, but society itself was so much different then. Look at how it is today. Look at how things are in our fellowship in itself. But just because the fellowship has changed doesn't mean that the disease affects us any differently than it ever did. And it doesn't mean that the spiritual solution as outlined in our big book of Alcoholics Anonymous has ever failed anyone who has thoroughly followed our path. In my experience, it works for 100% of the people that will follow it 100% of the time. But when I try and deviate and take my own path, that's where I get into trouble. I hope that answers your question a little bit, brother. And thank you. I love you all. And now here's time to hear from the man who knows way more than I do.
Thank you, Jamie. All right, come on in. You have a hidden hand too back there.
Hello, everybody. My name is Rod. I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic. And I don't know about that I know more than anybody else, but my experience tells me that this chapter applies when it's the woman who is an alcoholic equally as well as it does when it's the man who's the alcoholic. And I know that because when I first came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I was married to a woman alcoholic. And she was going to get sober at the same time I did, but she decided that wasn't for her. And I stayed married to her for a year while I was getting sober. But I did look at this chapter, and I did try to follow some of those suggestions when dealing with her. And in this case, it was not successful. She never did get sober as far as I know. Made a couple of half-hearted attempts at it, but I never actually followed the program. And I eventually had to leave because she wasn't willing to make any attempt to change what she was doing. But as far as what this chapter is talking about, it certainly applies to women alcoholics as well as men. And as far as your question, Michael, I think that question could be asked of a lot of the chapters in this book. When this book was written, like Jamie mentioned it, there weren't that many women alcoholics that were openly alcoholic and seeking help from this program. And before the Al-Anon program came into being, this chapter, along with the family afterwards, were the only sources of information for the families, the spouses and the families of alcoholics. Once Al-Anon came along and got rolling, then they kind of took over the role of what this chapter was doing before. And I think that's one of the reasons too that so many alcoholics don't bother to read this chapter, because they think that's for my wife. She could read that. That's fine. But or if the wife decides. In many cases, the wives are already in Al-Anon long before we get to AA. And so, yeah, I think there's probably more utilization of these suggestions now than there were when it was written, just because of the nature of how the whole thing has evolved. And with that, I'm going to let Trish have her turn. Thank you.
Thank you, Art. Trish.
Thanks, Art. Thanks, Shana. I'm Trish and I'm an alcoholic. And I notice more and more every time I read this chapter that it's telling me, even without my family knowing that I was drinking and how much I was drinking, but by my isolation of them, exactly how they were feeling and what they were thinking when they couldn't reach me. And as we're reading through this tonight, I'm recognizing that while it wasn't family, it was a very good friend who went through exactly the steps that were in here. Tell me that she'd been worried about me, perhaps needlessly, and that she thought I needed to know the subject better so that I had an understanding of the risk if I drank too much. And many conversations on how she thought that maybe I could stop drinking, or maybe I could try to moderate, or asking if I could moderate. And planting that seed of alcoholism over and over and over and over. And realizing that as we had the conversation, that sometimes I wasn't ready to hear it, but she kept bringing it up. I wouldn't bring it up, but she would bring it up every now and then, especially after she knew I had been out drinking again. And definitely the patient waiting, just waiting for the right time to bring it up again. And then finally asking if I was willing to stop, not for her, not for anybody else, but willing to stop for myself because of what alcoholism was doing to me. And for me, coming in the rooms, knowing I had somebody behind me, supporting me, was a big driving force, because I knew I wasn't alone, even before I walked into my first meeting. And, like it said in the book, and like I had said, if nothing else, all those conversations as she went through, not as a spouse, but as a caring friend, how the book directs, planting that seed and just waiting for the right time to have that conversation again, and then waiting again. And knowing, praying and hoping sooner or later that I would be willing to go to a meeting, talk to somebody else about it, find my way into the rooms or into some sort of recovery so that I would be able to have a better life. For me, not because she wanted me to, not because anybody else wanted me to. But my experience with her also shows me that I can use these same steps, not with husband, since I don't have one right now, but with any other friends who may need help, who may need direction. It's just one more way that I have to share what the program has done for me, and planting that seed and the reminder of being patient. Because even if I'm ready for somebody to stop drinking, doesn't mean they're ready to stop drinking. But I've got to remember to be available when they are ready. Thanks.
Thank you, Trish. It's 9 o'clock, but not everybody has shared. What shall we do?
Burning desires?
Dun, 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 dun.
Has the last few years of reading this chapter changed anybody's perspective? I knew you were going to shake your head. Well then, Shana, I guess we can wrap it up.
Okay. So from page 164, our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask Him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. The answers will come if your own house is in order. But obviously, you cannot transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with Him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact for us. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to Him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. And we will close this with a moment of silence for those that are still sick and suffering, both inside and outside of the meetings. We have a special way of doing it. We put our hands up in the screen. This is our virtual way to hold hands. And now I'll give you a moment of silence, and then we'll close out with the Lord's Prayer. And who will take us from shame to grace if we let Him? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Keep coming back.
Thank you. It works if you work it, so work it because you're worth it.
Oh,
good
yeah.
night,
Thank you.
friends.
Okay, everybody, have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenny.
You too. Good night.
Happy holidays, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy
Thanksgiving,
everybody. Thanksgiving. Yes.
Have a great Thanksgiving, guys.
Hey, and
Oh,
Good
I
night,
like that.
Thanksgiving.
I wrote you a little note.